Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to our planetGOLD Final Access to Finance workshop series. My name is Candice Mkamburi Jumo, I'm a mining engineer at the Impact Facility, and I will be your host for the session today. Thank you for joining. Next slide, please. Yeah, before we get started, let me get into a couple of housekeeping rules. This session has simultaneous French and Spanish translation, so please select the right audio channel. If you want to listen in French or Spanish, at the bottom right of your screen, you should be able to click on the globe and pick the right translation for you. Kindly stay on mute throughout the presentation to avoid any background noise. Please feel free to use the chat box to pose any questions throughout the presentation. My team would highlight the questions and hopefully get them answered during this session or get them answered as a follow-up. Please note that the session is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the planetGOLD resource library on the website. At the end of the session, in a couple of days, we will share a meeting summary with you, along with the slide deck and the recording and all accompanying assets for all those who have signed up. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, for those who have just joined us now, my name is Candice Jumwa. I work for the Impact Facility, and I'll be your host today. I've been working at the Impact Facility for the last 3 years, and allow me to introduce you to the agenda for the session before I get into the details. So we'll start with an introduction on my end for the reason that we're here today, and then we'll have a speaker session where the speakers will speak on alternative ASGM financing pathways with regards to the work that they have been implementing across different geographies. And then we'll have an interactive discussion and Q&A towards the end of the session, before which we will be able to close the session today. Thank you for joining. Next slide, please. Yes. And so we have invited today a number of guest participants to speak on the alternative access to finance work that they have been doing in the different geographies. In the last 3 sessions that we have had in this access to finance webinar series, we have heard from artisanal and small-scale miners on the financing needs and their experience accessing informal financing and the challenges that they have encountered accessing formal financing. We have also heard from banks and microfinancing institutions on the efforts they have been doing in trying to engage in this, marginalized and underserved sector. And we understand that the processes to open up the sector to the formal finance situation are likely to take a longer time because of lack of financing into the sector. And to paint it into perspective, current initiatives engaging with the sector are leveraging mostly grant or donor financing or financing from market innovators such as mining companies that are, entering into toll milling agreements with the miners in the concessions or the miners in and around the areas that they work with. But outside of that, we recognize that without significant investment, the sector is still going to lack. And so only with significant investment can we professionalize the sector, improve the operational health and safety of the sector, and also, as a core mandate of the planetGOLD Global Initiative, reduce mercury use in the sector and eventually eliminate mercury use in the sector. And so this is why we are having the session today. We are here to listen to a couple of experts from around the world who've been able to provide access to formal financing in areas where microfinance institutions or banking institutions or commercial institutions have yet to engage with artisanal and small-scale miners or are not yet ready to enter into the sector. And so these initiatives have been able to provide a service to these underserved sector. And so the speakers on our session today will basically answer the question, in the absence of commercial funders, what other ways can initiatives engaged in the sector support minors accessing formal financing? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. And so we have a speaker from Kenya and Tanzania and from Burkina Faso, and they will be reflecting on how they have been able to engage with artisanal and small-scale miners in their regions, the rationale behind their mechanisms, the due diligence and risk assessment approach they have undertaken in engaging with the mechanism, the performance of their respective instruments, and the challenges encountered and lessons learned. Next slide, please. And so on our speakers today, we have Abdoulata Dabir, a mining consultant and gender expert from Burkina Faso, who will be representing the work of the non-governmental organization Impact. We have Natasha Nzingo and Calvin Lang from the Impact facility. Natasha is a junior mining engineer working for the company, and Calvin Lang is the gold program manager in the region. And lastly, we have Edward Kony, the co-founder and president of Mwamba Mining in Tanzania, who will be here to speak about their toll milling services in Tanzania. Yeah. And just before we go to the next slide, one of our speakers, Abdoulata, I'm not sure if he's been able to join yet. If he hasn't, maybe we could start with the Impact Facility slide before then.
Candice, would you like me to speak to then skip ahead?
Yes.
To the second part?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can see that he's
Candice,
on.
yeah, Abdoulata's online.
Yeah. So maybe we go to the next slide. Yes, allow me to introduce you to Mr. Abdoulata before he speaks. So Abdoulata is an economic empowerment and financial inclusion specialist. He's an independent consultant based in Burkina Faso, and he's a miner himself. He specializes in economic empowerment, financial inclusion, and microfinance. With extensive experience in artisanal and small-scale mining, he is a trainer of trainers in village savings and credit associations, methodologies, and a certified trainer on miner techniques and environmentally sound practices for the ASM sector. Abdoulata has a degree in project and program management and has previously collaborated with the Alliance for Responsible Mining on several impactful projects in the artisanal gold mining sector of Burkina Faso. Welcome to the session, Dr. Abdoulata. Please take it away. Can you hear Abdoulata? Yes.
Good morning. Good morning, Candice. Good morning, participants.
Buenos días a todos los participantes.
So I had some
Yo les doy la
issues
bienvenida a esta reunión
because the link that was sent wasn't opening. So I'm sorry, I'm a little late. So this is, I'm sorry for this a little delay, but if you can hear me well, I can go ahead with my presentation. Give me your green light, please.
I can hear you.
You go ahead. Can you hear us? Hear me well?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Candice, to give us the opportunity to introduce to you our financing and funding model implemented as part of the AFECOR model. My presentation will turn around 8 points, 6 points. First, about the impact, then the context of ASGM in Burkina, then a Foundation for Peace, which is a project implemented in Burkina, then our model, AFECOR, for the responsible credit, which will be the center, the focus of my presentation. Then the performance of the model. Then the link with other revenue or income generation. 7, we will talk about the leadership of women within this model. And finally, the lessons learned and recommendations. So everybody or participants could maybe be inspired or replicate some other of our ideas. Next slide. So about impact, we are an NGO, non-governmental organization based in Canada. They have intervention in Africa, in DRC, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, and Mali. The mission is to transform the way natural resources are managed in areas where security and human rights are threatened. So you understand why impact is active in the ASGM sector. So this is a sector where human rights are strongly threatened and where the resources are informally exploited. Next slide. Next slide. No, it's the right one. So an overview of the ASGM sector in Burkina is really developing right now. The gold mining was seen for a long time as a second type of activities, but right now is really developing, and this sector has a very strong economic potential, but is facing challenges. So we are still starting to develop and making a lot of effort with the governments and the partners to regarding all the challenges, limited access to banks and funding resources. So that is, we have more informal practice in terms of financing in this sector. And this is really making the situation open to fraud for the marketing of gold. The women are very, very represented in this sector, but they do not have the same equality rights and access to the resources, and they are performing secondary tasks. So there are some gender inequality and discrimination. Next slide. So this is in this context in Burkina that Impact started to work through this project called Foundation for Peace, based on 3 components. First, financial inclusion through the model Africa Women's Empowerment through Responsible Community Savings and Credit, which is a model that's been adapted to the Burkina context. And then incentive for responsible practice and legal gold trading. And finally, improving strategies to combat gold marketing fraud. So the first pillar, financial inclusion through the Africa model, is the focus of my presentation today. Next slide. So the Africa model is based on what we call adapting the Village Savings and Credit Loan Association, VSLA. So this is a system that is existing in many countries in Africa, but it was never tested in the mining sector. So it is adapted for artisanal and small-scale mining environment. So beyond the economic aspect, there is a social dimension to it, and is very well adapted to our communities. So the adoption of this mechanism go through these specific village associations. And what these associations do, they are gathering, some people are gathering and choosing themselves based on their common interest to organize a group of people that is contributing to a common fund. They are meeting every week for their savings, and they start their process that is lasting around 9 to 12 months. And then the common funds is redistributed based on different criteria. And after a certain time, they're able to self-finance their activities or to start new activities. The savings is safely kept in a safe box, and the leaders of the group are have this key to this safe box. And to manage these fundings, there is a committee that is ensuring that the VSLA is currently or correctly governed and managed. And this is within the spirit of solidarity, of common contribution. So these are little saving adding up, and this solidarity fund is allocated to the members, the association members who have economic or social problems. Let's say a death in the family as well. So the allocation of these resources are, the criteria are really decided by the leaders of these or director of these committees. And they also have an internal regulation that are establishing all the conditions to contribute, to reallocate, to divide all the funds. And so they have really sort of bylaws that are regulating the functioning and the operating of this village association. This is a mechanism that is mainly open for men in Burkina. Nevertheless, in the mining sector, we also support the women's leadership. So we also have in Burkina a gender transformative approach, and we focus on women's leadership and management. So we also have secretary that are roles that are taken by women or treasurer. And we can see that there is a real empowerment of women within this type of mechanism. Next slide. So the success of this mechanism of VSLA for the ASGM is based on a methodology to ensure success. So within our project, we had a first assessment of the community to first assess the existing mechanism. So take stock of the situation, identify strengths and weaknesses. So we first made an analysis and assessment of the situation to understand the context. So it is a very classic model, as you can see, with different steps from the community awareness to the creation of the VSLA to setting up the management committees and then create the solidarity fund and then the allocation of loans and the capital sharing. So first, we have a community awareness. For our project, we started in June to August 2021. We called upon the women, men to present the program so that we create a kind of ownership for the project. So we continue our awareness process. Then we implemented this VSLA to make sure that they are operating correctly. The beneficiaries are proposing the way the resources will be distributed. And we had some capacity building along the way during the entire cycle. So we started in June 2021. The implementation of VSLA was done in September 2021, training in October 2021, in December, the first operations, and then up to end of December 2022. So we implemented different activities, such as training at the and we associated and involved and engaged women. They were trained to be able to manage accounting And through this exchanging, we really understood reality. We proposed solutions to their local problems. Next slide. So at the end of this cycle, we had the capitalized these results. We had one case study before we started this project of VSLA to kind of a baseline to understand the targeted people. So we did also a survey and benchmarking. Then we are now 54 association with around 1,300 members, and 80% are women. And they have successfully completed this first financial cycle and are continuing their activities for a second year without direct support from the project. And many, their main income is from this mining work. And we understand that this mechanism is specifically suited for this context. At the end of the cycle, almost 80 million of CFA francs were mobilized and saved, around 170,000 Canadian dollars, which represent an average of 5,000 CFA francs per month per member, so 11 Canadian dollars. Next slide. Between January and October 2022, we 1,200 people took out a credit through their VSLA, 87% of men and 94% of women members. 100% of the credit have been repaid, which is a very high success rate. And this allows the fund, the treasury fund, and to the cash flow to continue. 47% of the VSLA members have started an income generating activity, AGA, thanks to the credit or saving through this mechanism. So really, it is a very viable and sustainable financing mechanism in this context. 96% of participants found accessing credit in the community was very difficult, but after joining a VSLA, almost all the participants found that accessing credit was much easier. This was one of the data that came from the survey that we conducted in December 2022. Slide, please. So what is the performance of the model? 99% of participants said that they wanted to continue their membership to the VSLA for another year, and 70% of the rest of the population said that they wanted to join a VSLA. These are the data also from the survey conducted in 2022. So we saw a real excitement, a real really an acceptance, a very good rate of acceptance of this model, and that is already spontaneously replicated in the target communities to reach new members. So by the end of the project in January 2023, we expect to have 6 new groups in the North and Central and 13 more in the West Central region. Slide, please. So how to relate this system, this mechanism with the other source of livelihood? Beside this mechanism, because it's not available in all communities so far, we still need to work to make it available for more members, and we need to help communities to organize themselves in order to create these village saving and loan associations. %70 of members benefited from access to the Solidarity Fund that I talked about before to cover some contingency expensive and foreseen expenses, such as medical expenses, school fees, funerals, or repairs for their home after a disaster. All the VSLA voluntarily withdrew a total of 1,500 Canadian dollars from their Solidarity Fund to be invested in community services such as health centers, schools, drinking water wells, reforestation, make a donation to internally displaced person in this North Central region. So we can say that the VSLA mechanism is a bridge to conventional financing, that is banks and saving banks. And members can really identify with their association much easier. It's much more easier for them than to access the official or formal banking system. And this adaptation to the context is really the key to success. So that is a real potential, and VSLA contributes to social cohesion, to peace building in the artisanal mining communities. And this Solidarity Fund is a very important tool to strengthen the social cohesion within these communities. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the model also enhanced the leadership of women. And because in majority, we have a majority of women engaged in this model, and this is without any risk for them to be able to save and to take loans without really having to train them specifically or support them. So as I said, 80% are women. And when it comes to fund or money management, they can really show that they are more capable than men sometimes. So they show their knowledge in financial management. Next slide. And their sphere of influence is increasing, and some of them take more role. Next slide. So there is no mechanism without challenges, of course. So we needed to face some challenges. As I said at the beginning, before we implemented the VSLA, the access to finance was almost impossible. And other models that were experimented did not bring about any success. And the communities that may have been exposed to savings group approach in the past, and there are different names depending on the context. But to determine which term is familiar to the target population to encourage the buy-in, and which may be associated with a previous negative experience, we were able to really understand the context, the reality, and reassure all the population, targeted population. And one of the main issue was securing the funds. So the money is kept by a managing committee. There is a treasurer who has the keys. So the risk of breaking in or and the responsibility is on this management committee, and they are doing shift to really pass on the keys and minimize the risk.
Sorry,
During each meeting, they are trying to minimize the risk.
yeah, sorry, Abdulata. Maybe we can leave the rest of the information to the end of the session. There'll be a discussion session and a Q&A session at the end. We need to leave some space for the rest of the speakers because we only just have 2 hours. But I'm aware that this is the last slide before the next presentation. So maybe in the next 1 minute, you can try to wind up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mercy, thank you so much for your time, Abdulata. And so our next session is going to be a brief from the Impact Facility team, who are rolling out our blended finance lease to purchase program in East Africa, that is Kenya and Tanzania. And speaking on this session will be my 2 colleagues, Natasha Nzingo, who is based in Kenya and also works across our program in Tanzania, and our colleague Calvin Line, who is the gold manager. Before we start the video, maybe allow me to briefly introduce the 2 speakers. So Calvin Line is the program manager for the gold program in the Impact Facility. He has over 15 years of experience delivering social, economic, environmental, and change programs across the sector. Calvin has held roles at all levels of seniority with plenty of involvement in business development, project management, research, and policy. He is joined by my colleague Natasha Nzingo, who is a junior mining engineer and a project officer at the Impact Facility. She is based in Nairobi. She focuses on miner engagement and assessment to verify eligibility for mine investment geared towards increasing efficiency and productivity of the sector. I can see in the chat box that people have questions for Mr. Abdulata. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of this session. So there will be a chance to ask questions to the speakers. We will also share several case studies of the work that Mr. Abdullata has done with Impact in Burkina Faso and the work that we have done at the Impact Facility at the end of the session. And so, yeah, there'll be a lot more to come. So next slide, please. Let's start the video.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the webinar. I'm Calvin, the Program Manager for TIF's Gold Program, and we also have...
And I'm Natasha, a Project Officer.
So today we're going to give you a bit of an overview of what TIF does, our approach, and then Natasha's going to talk in a bit more detail about our lease to purchase program in Kenya. I will then provide a bit of a reflection on what our investment processes are, the lessons we've learned, some of the results we've had to date, before Natasha gives you maybe a couple of case studies of specific mines we've worked with and the impact we've had. And I'll wrap up just by telling you a little bit about some of the additional mine financing approaches that we have coming up in the near future. Thanks, Natasha. So the Impact Facility, we were established to support communities with mineral wealth to turn that into community prosperity. And we're a UK-based not-for-profit with an impact investing arm, and we have a growing presence in Eastern Central Africa. And we bring together various stakeholders, investors, donors, corporate partners to support responsible artisanal and small-scale mining. And obviously, we're here today talking about access to financing and our model, because a key thing that we believe is that responsible mining is possible if ASMs can get access to the kind of financial support they need, to access the kind of equipment they need, to professionalize and improve their operations. And let's move to the next slide. We have two major programs. I won't say too much about this. We're obviously going to be talking a lot about Gold today, which is the program that Natasha and I work on. We have the Lake Victoria 2030 Gold program, which is working with artisanal and small-scale gold mines to support responsible production, improve productivity among those mines. And we're going to talk about that in quite some detail. Another major program we have is working on cobalt with artisanal and small-scale mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo through the Fair Cobalt Alliance. Let's move to the next slide. So at a high level, what does the Gold program do? I've already said we're here to ensure responsible production in artisanal and small-scale gold mining. So we want to improve productivity, but we also want to see environmental, social, governance, performance improvements at the mine. We do this through three things. We take an investment-led approach, providing access to finance for equipment at the mines that we work with. We provide technical assistance. We have a team of mine engineers and finance professionals who will thoroughly assess a mine to determine if it's eligible for financial support and put a plan in place to support that mine to improve whilst it's also getting that investment. And we will work with mines that fall below our investment criteria to support them to improve so that they can eventually become eligible as well. And finally, we work on downstream demand, connecting gold buyers with responsible artisanal and small-scale gold mining. I'll give one small example of how we're doing that at the very end of this presentation. Next slide, please. We are very fortunate to be supported by a range of funders, private sector, not-for-profit, and private individuals. We operate a blended financing approach. So we have grant financing to support all of our technical assistance work, for example, but then we have investment finance, which is used in our lease to purchase program and our loan program, which exists in Tanzania. And of course, one of the donors is one of our supporters is planetGOLD themselves. And let's move to the next slide, please. And I think this is over to Natasha to talk a bit about the lease to purchase model in Kenya.
Thank you. So the lease to purchase model is basically a contractual agreement between the Impact Facility and the artisanal small-scale miners. So with the Impact Facility, we'll purchase equipment from suppliers on your behalf, and you, the miner, will be making monthly repayments. Once the contract is complete, we will give you a transfer of ownership, which you will purchase at $1 and the equipment becomes yours. So we have several eligibility criteria at the moment. We're only working in Kenya and we deal with gold mining. As a miner, you need to have a type of formal registration And we are very particular when it comes to land ownership. So is it land? Is it a title deed? Is it a formal arrangement? Is it community land? Whatever it may be, we need proof of land ownership. The next thing is we require the miner to be operational for at least 6 months with a form of production records. We require the miner to have basic business skills and practicing good governance when it comes to management of the mine and its workers. And lastly, we have our own ESG compliance, and we at the very least expect miners to meet the minimum criteria, which I will speak of in the next slide. So we have created an impact escalator. So you think of it as stairs. So most miners are at the pre-investment level, which is the minimum requirement. So you are formally registered, you're paying your royalty at the legally obligated rate. There is no worst forms of child labor or worst forms of mercury management, etc. And once we are with you at the pre-investment criteria, we assist you in improving your mindset to the continuous improvement. Then we transition into best practice improvement. And oftentimes, when it comes to our investment model, at the pre-investment criteria, you have access to up to 20,000 US dollars. With continuous improvement, you have more than 30,000 US dollars, and at best practice, it's up to 50,000 US dollars. And what are some of the contract terms that we have in our lease to purchase model? So we have three main things. We have the equipment selection, leasing fees, and their repayment. So with equipment selection, you as the miner, you select the equipment, and sometimes some miners really are familiar with the brands that they need. We offer you technical advice on the specifications of the equipment that you need to use for your mine site. We will get a competitive quote, and once we have agreed on the said equipment, we will transition into signing the contract. And then the next thing of importance is our leasing fees. So our total costs include transportation, insurance against theft and fire, and installation costs for any equipment that requires installation. Once we have moved forward from installation, we have an additional service fee that is added to our total cost, and all this is subject to the national commercial interest rate that is in Kenya, which is currently at, I think, 17%, if I'm not wrong. We have optional costs for maintenance and servicing. We expect the miner to be servicing and maintaining the equipment. Lastly, we have repayment. So when it comes to our repayment, we offer either bank transfers or mobile banking. We give you a grace period of up to 3 months, which is optional. You could decide to begin paying immediately. We also offer payment breaks because we understand the seasonality of mining. So you get up to 2 free payment breaks during a year, and you can get access to an additional 2 paid payment breaks, but we require a record of repayment before you have access to any of these breaks. As with any business, there will be penalties for late payments or missed payments, and in the case of default, we will come and repossess our equipment and redeploy it elsewhere. So what are the steps when it comes to our lease to purchase model? We will first onboard the miner and conduct basic know your customer, know your counterparty. Then from there, we will conduct a mine assessment. And from this mine assessment, we will create an integrated profile. This profile will be submitted to our investment committee, which is the third step, investment determination and approval. And based off the decision of the investment committee, we will transition into contracting and equipment order. So we will meet together, discuss contractual terms, we will explain anything that is not clear, and then we will purchase the equipment. With the lease rollout, so the equipment is present at your mine site, it is functioning as it is intended to function, and hopefully it is having the desired impact at the mine site. Once we move from lease rollout, we go to equipment maintenance and servicing. This is basically the everyday use of the equipment. We will ensure that during this time, we will come and visit the mine just to make sure everything is running smoothly. And lastly, we have impact monitoring. We are interested with the impact of the equipment that it has on your mine site, to your workers, and to the community in general. We do give options of additional investment once you have shown enough impact and you have made monthly repayments, you can come back for an additional investment, and it will go through the same process of submission to the investment committee, then contracting, lease, and equipment monitoring. Please feel free to ask any questions on the lease to purchase model in the comment section. Back to you, Calvin.
Thank you, Natasha. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the investment committee process. I think this is really important to us because it keeps us accountable and it provides an added layer of scrutiny and expertise, which has really helped to ensure that the program that we are offering, the services that we're offering are robust and our client assessments are robust. So for each, Natasha talked a bit about how we create a very detailed mine assessment, and then that comes alongside an investment note, which will provide summary information about the mine's finances, its ability to afford a proposed lease, the basic due diligence information, is everything in place to show that they are operating legitimately, for instance, and where they're operating at the moment in terms of their ASGM performance and what we think the impact of any investment could be. We have a committee at the moment of 4 members who are experts in areas like impact investing, mining, responsible supply chains. They will scrutinize every investment note, decide whether to recommend, to ask for further information and changes before making a decision, or to recommend not to invest. And this has been a really valuable process for us, having that third-party review, if you like, of any investment that we're proposing. It's led to an awful lot of changes to our processes over in time, improvements to the way, for instance, the type of information that we collect when it comes to trying to project what a mine's revenue and expenses are to test whether our product is really affordable to a mine. And once the investment committee has approved, I think Natasha's talked about the overall steps, so actually we'll skip past these last couple of points because I think they've sort of been covered already. Let's talk quickly about the track record of the lease to purchase program here. So there are some key stats, but let's just give you a summary that we have had 10 mines onboarded in total, 12 lease to purchase contracts. So some mines have received a second investment, 4 contracts completed, 3 defaulted or cancelled, and the total investment deployed has been $170,000 to date, with $76,000 of that repaid and $103,000 of that still outstanding in monthly payments. So if everything goes smoothly with our remaining contracts at the moment, we would see a positive return on investment. We've certainly seen some losses from defaults and a lot of lessons learned early on in the program, and we have changed our processes to minimize the likelihood that we would encounter those similar situations in future. And the good thing about lease to purchase program is where you do have a default, we can of course reclaim the equipment and distribute it to another client and reuse it there. So let's talk a little bit about what have we learned, what has helped us make the lease to purchase program successful. And we certainly think the financial performance that we have so far should only improve due to the lessons that we have learnt. I'll just pick up on a couple of things here from this slide. Firstly, that we have to collect, we have to do extensive due diligence to really understand the situation. We're investing into a risky sector. We know that's why there is not an awful lot of access to existing financial services from banks, for instance. So we have to try and de-risk that by collecting a lot of information. But that conflicts with the fact that mines can often get fatigue through us asking for so much information. So we've had to learn how to try and strike the right balance in the due diligence that we're doing. Another key thing is the flexibility in our contractual terms. Natasha talked about payment breaks, grace period, to try and make sure that our lease to purchase model is fitting in with the way mines work to the greatest extent possible. We seek to ensure that mines are proactively applying for our leases, so showing that there is a demand. We're not just reaching out to mines to see if they want to participate in our lease to purchase model. And it's certainly true to say, we're still heavily dependent on grant funding to make sure the product works successfully at the moment, because there needs to be a lot of work done with the mines to provide technical assistance to bring them up to a level where they're ready to receive investment. Let's move on. In terms of the overall track record, between 2022 and 2023, the mines that we had in our client base saw approximately 50% increase in gold production, and we did see ASGM performance improvement at every single mine. In some cases, these were quite modest improvements, for instance, improvements in their record keeping, but in others, some really great improvements around improved use and provision of PPE for mine workers, improved mine shaft ventilation, for instance. So not only are we seeing that this model can work in terms of the mine's productivity, but it is having tangible performance improvements at the mine as well to ensure that gold is being produced to an increasingly responsible standard. Let's move to the next slide. We'll skip past these, but just to say these slides will be shared later, and you can see this is just a couple of examples of how gold production has increased at some of our mines and the kind of analysis we can do with the data we get. Over to you, Natasha, maybe just to give one or two specific examples from some of our partner mines.
Thank you, Calvin. I will also speak only for 2 clients. So we have our first case, they're called Antelope Mine. It's a mercury-free operation, which means that they are processing through VAT leaching. They have a small workforce of 20 workers. So they had begun their operations in 2018, but we began investing with them at in 2019. So we have had 3 successful investments when it comes to Antelope. The first contract, valued at $10,000, was for a compressor, a winch, and a ball mill. They were just beginning at that given point. And the second contract was valued at $7,811 for a generator, and now we are currently in their third contract, which is valued at $19,000. And with this mindset, it's been really impressive with how they are progressing. Their shaft, everything is just going on well. You can see that they have completed 2 contracts, so there is something about our model that is working and that it works for them. Another case study we have, this is a testimonial from the specific mine. As you can see, the impact that we have had on them is they have had 150% increase in ore recovery. You can see most of their miners are wearing personal protective equipment, as the photo has been attached there. They have improved their environmental performance, such as their tailings management, and we have seen the livelihoods of the miners increase between 20% has increased between 20 and 100%. And we are very proud of this mine site. It's one of our best mine sites that we work with in Kenya. We also have another mine site that is mercury free, but since we are sharing these slides later after the presentation, and because of time, allow me to skip forward to a case of a defaulted contract. So we had a miner in Western Kenya. They approached us and they required a compressor. And during the 3-month grace period, unfortunately, they chose to use another compressor that they claimed worked more efficiently than the equipment that we had given them. But nevertheless, we still terminated their contract amicably to the point where they also stored the compressor on our behalf, and we were able to redeploy said compressor to a different miner. So we had invested around $9,000 for the initial compressor, and the resale value was $8,000. So we had a depreciation of around $960. I hope with the various case study, you're able to see how our leasing model has been behaving. Back to you, Calvin.
Thanks so much, Natasha. So very quickly, let me tell you about a couple of other things we're doing on access to finance and support to artisanal small-scale gold mines. In Tanzania, we have very recently launched a loan facility providing equipment loans to mines in the Geita region of Tanzania. That facility is capitalized with $600,000, aiming to distribute 20 loans over 2 years in the first instance. I won't go over too many of the details here, but I think this is really exciting to us. The potential market for us in Gator is huge. The gold market there has anything from around about 300, 400 kilos of gold going through it per month. Most of that comes from artisanal and small scale gold mines. The fact that in the Tanzanian context, artisanal and small scale mining has been so formalized compared to Kenya presents us with real opportunities to scale up and work with mines there. It also comes with, all the regulatory requirements that we need to meet as well, but it's a great opportunity for us, and we're really excited that we're launching this alongside our lease to purchase program in Kenya. So feel free to ask further questions about this later. And finally, I just want to talk about responsible gold credits. So the lease to purchase program and the loan program are obviously operating with mines already who have an investment need, where we see an investment case to improve their productivity and ASG performance. But we also want to create other market mechanisms which are going to encourage artisanal and small scale gold mines to improve how they are producing gold. Responsible mineral credits are a mechanism for the downstream sectors who are purchasing minerals to support responsible artisanal and small scale mining. In the case of gold, it's not always easy for purchasers of gold to be able to trace exactly where their gold is coming from, and to be able to set up a chain of custody model where they can verify that there is responsible artisanal small scale gold being used in their products. So a first step for companies can be to invest using responsible gold credits. And effectively, the way that works is that TIFF and our partners will work with mines to verify that they meet a minimum performance standard, a minimum ESG performance standards, which shows that they are operating at a basic level of responsibility. And we will work with them to verify exactly what their gold production has been. And at that point, once we can say a certain amount of gold has been produced at a minimum responsible standard, we can say those credits have been created, which can be purchased at a premium by a downstream gold purchaser. They can do that in proportion to their gold footprint. And that premium is used to implement further improvement products and projects at that mine, so that there is an ever increasing level of responsible performance at that mine. So it's a mechanism to enable downstream purchasers of gold to support improvements in artisanal small scale mining, making it ever more responsible. There's a lot of detail on this slide. I think we've run out of time, so I won't say any more about that for now, but just to say this is yet another mechanism that we're developing to provide financing for artisanal small scale gold mines to improve their responsible production of gold. So thank you very much to you all for your attention today, and we look forward to your questions later. Bye.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you to the Impact Facility team. And now to the last speaker of our session today. Over to you, Edward Connew, who's the co-founder and president of Mwamba Mining. Yes, next slide, please. Sorry. Yes. Ed studied economics and human-centered design at Dartmouth College, where he co-founded Mwamba alongside his brother and Tanzanian classmate Samuel Bahebe. Over the last 8 years, Mwamba has become one of Tanzania's fastest growing junior mining gold companies, one committed to developing gold mining assets, programs, and technologies that promote the sustainable development of artisanal and small-scale gold mining communities in the country. Ed is leading the development of Mwamba's ASGM supply chain traceability solution, Worthy. We have a Q&A session immediately after this session by Ed. So yeah, have your questions on hand. The speakers will be on hand to answer you. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ed Cornew. Thank you to the Impact Facility for inviting me to present on this important topic. I'll be discussing my experience as a founder and president of Mwamba as it relates to informal financing as a means of reducing mercury usage in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining space. My experience is rooted in Tanzania, where we've started and pursued the business of Mwamba. So look forward to telling you more about how our business is working to reduce mercury usage in Tanzania and provide artisanal miners with access to informal financing. So a quick brief on Mwamba, who we are and what we stand for. So we're an ESG-focused junior mining company working to sustainably develop and grow Tanzania's gold mining industry. So our mission is to develop gold mining assets, programs, and technologies that promote the health and welfare of Tanzanian gold mining communities. And we're approaching this from both ends of the market. So we actually have initiatives in the large-scale gold mining sphere, as well as programs in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining area. Namely, we have an exploration joint venture with Barrick Gold in the Nzega district of Tanzania, and we're currently pursuing a, right now, toll milling business for artisanal small-scale gold miners that is evolving into more of an ASGM co-development model where we partner with miners to upgrade the full value chain of their activities, all the way from how they explore and do mine planning, how they execute on mining projects and leverage modern equipment and technology, and then ultimately process using mercury-free, responsible technologies and techniques. So again, our value proposition really spans the full end-to-end mine process. We have offerings to help miners better understand what resources they have, how to engineer their mines to maximize on that potential, and then ultimately recover the maximum amount of gold they can from the ore that they produce. And by providing these services, we look to eliminate mercury at partner mine sites and eliminate child labor as just two main areas of focus towards eliminating worst practice at partner mine sites and ultimately helping our partner miners join the real economy and access global markets. These services each have sort of unique value proposition that collectively work to boost their productivity and the safety of their operations. I'm not going to list them for you, but for example, planning, you're going to increase the ROI of your exploration and mining activities. Mining, you're going to get more ore out of the ground faster. Processing, you're going to capture more gold from the ore that you work so hard to get. So just moving on how we do this specifically, we have two engagement models that we offer miners today. So one is a mine co-development model that's very intrusive. We come in and essentially partner with the mine operators to optimize every aspect of their operations. We bring in drill rigs, we help them understand the resource, we mechanize the mining operation. Typically this means upgrading shaft operations, referencing sort of industrial best practices and leveraging modern day equipment. On the other end, we have mine services. Today, this is predominantly just processing services. So this is where miners approach us with pre-existing above ground ore stockpiles, and we process that material either for payment or more commonly for a share of production. So both of these two engagement models of mine co-development and processing services in themselves represent informal financing, because you can engage us for both with no money down. Whether it's mine co-development or processing services, we'll do them both just for a share of the production. If you come to us for processing services, you're liable to give us about 20% of the produced gold, whereas if we're coming in and doing mine co-development and taking a lead role in designing, implementing, and operating mining operations, you'll see Mwamba taking more of a majority of the produced gold. But at the end of the day, we find that mine co-development actually drives the most impact and income uplift for partner miners in our supply chain. And to make this all possible, to make this all scalable, we're developing a technology platform we're calling WASI that really streamlines that vendor management, automates a lot of this due diligence and traceability functionality that's needed to ultimately sell artisanally or small scale originated gold into global markets, into LBMA refiners with the most stringent due diligence and sourcing requirements. And really, we started this business with one key objective. It was to eliminate mercury in the sector and capitalize on the business opportunity that doing so represented. Mercury, as most of us know, only captures about 30% of the available gold content in ore, whereas modern methods capture 100% of the available gold. However, actually creating access to that technology is a little more difficult than one might assume. So most of these artisanal or small-scale gold mining operations use ore production share agreements to essentially compensate laborers and organize the mine site. And while they're good at ensuring fair compensation in a highly informal sort of labor market, they're not so great in that they fragment the ore supply, which keeps a large majority of stakeholders dependent on mercury processing. So if you look at the slide in front of you, you'll see on the left sort of a breakdown of who the main stakeholders are. So there's mine site management, and these are the more passive stakeholders that, for example, license holder gets the license, creates legal title to mine on the land. There might be a cooperative that operates like a labor union, sort of managing people issues, a landowner who owns surface rights and essentially creates access to the land and hosts the mining operations. But then you have the shaft teams or the actual mining operators who come and mine on the land. And all of this is governed with a production share agreement wherein, for example, if I, as a shaft owner, want to come and mine on a piece of land, I know that I personally, as the organizer and financier, am going to get 40% of the ore produced. My labor team, typically consisting of 10 laborers, is going to get 30%, and we're going to owe 30% up towards mine site management, which may consist of just a license holder who is also the landowner. It could be a group of three, a license holder, a landowner, a cooperative, and so on. But the general rule of thumb is that ore produced is divided among stakeholders, and that is how compensation is handled. And that's actually a pretty good thing when you don't know what the ore grade is of the ore you're pulling out of the ground. It maintains performance incentives and so on. The real negative, again, is that it fragments the ore supply significantly across all stakeholders so that each individual ends up with what is their allotted sum of ore. In the context of the mercury problem, this means that aggregators in mine site management aggregate a significantly larger portion of the production than do shaft teams, specifically shaft laborers. So if let's say that a given mine site only has a license holder who is also the landowner, he's going to get 30% of all the material mined on that land. He's liable to have enough volume to seek processing services, enough liquidity to go purchase them should he choose to, although there are production share agreements available. However, the shaft teams that come and mine on his land don't aggregate. They simply contribute. So if you look at the net production of a mine site, each shaft owner might get as little as 2.6% of the total production, and each individual shaft labor would get 0.2% of the production. And these are extremely small volumes of ore, and definitely inadequately small to go seek out sort of capital-intensive, infrastructure-based modern processing methods that would yield higher recoveries, not involve the use of mercury, and so on. So really, again, just in a nutshell, these production share agreements are great at managing fair compensation in an informal setting. Where they fall short is that they fragment the ore supply and create very small sums allocated to a majority of stakeholders at the mine site, which are too small and held by stakeholders who are too illiquid to then go seek out modern processing services that don't entail mercury. And that in itself is more or less the mercury dilemma, and what makes it so hard to connect artisanal and small-scale gold miners with modern processing technologies that are mercury-free. At Mwamba, we're implementing a ore traceability solution we're calling WASI that actually formalizes these production share agreements as smart contracts to enable transparent payments for all stakeholders. And what this essentially allows us to do is aggregate all of the ore production from a given shaft, document the amount of gold that we expect to recover from that shaft, create transparency on what that expected recovery is for all stakeholders, and then pay all stakeholders directly. So no longer does everyone need to walk home with a bag of ore and then use some sort of sluicing slide and mercury rig to get money to eat that day. They can now all work as a team to create one stockpile to transact with Mwamba and have confidence that they're going to get their fair share. And this happens in two ways. First, by taking down the production share agreement, which they've agreed to with the license holder, which was shown in the previous slide. And second, by documenting what are the labor allotments for a given batch. And now, a big reason that miners don't want to pool ore resources is because, well, A, performance incentives. You want to make sure the guy next to you is just as keen on finding good material as you are. But also, characteristics between shafts might be highly different. One shaft might be producing 20 gram per ton ore, while the other is producing 5 gram per ton ore. So we've solved for this by saying that, you know, we will transact with we'll transact with miners at a shaft level. So if there's one mine site with 10 shafts, Mwamba will document the ore grade, the expected recovery of the ore coming out of each of the 10 shafts. And we think that's the right level to start grouping artisanal small-scale gold miners to incent collaboration without undermining the performance incentives that really drive production share agreements in the first place. And so here's a look at where we are today with our mine co-development model. This is an aerial view of Geita near Buziba village, where our CIP processing plant is located. So we've signed on 5 mines to our co-development model who have agreed to give us 80%, roughly, there's some variance between contracts, but 80% of their produced gold in return for both mine development assistance, drilling, and processing services. So the 3 that you see in green have been contractually secured, and we're in the process of actually sort of specifying what the investment in those sites will look like. The 2 that you see in orange are in the contracting stage, and we're just working through some specificities there. We're much more keen on pursuing mine co-developments just because it lets us take a more active hand in really transacting with and benefiting the entire mine site. If you think back to our 2 offerings, if our processing services offering today, we really only see mine site management approach us because they're the only stakeholders that can accumulate enough ore to seek out processing services. So we see mine co-development as the winning strategy towards really eliminating all mercury usage at site, because it's very possible that of our processing service customers, there are still a lot of upstream laborers who are receiving bags of ore that they are forced to then use mercury to convert into gold, to liquidate into money, to eat the next day. And really our goal is to have no mercury in our upstream supply chain. So this is a bit of where we're at today. We're very excited to have these 5 mines enrolled, and we're actively developing these. And now here's a specific example of how this has gone at one of the 3 secure joint venture sites, which was on the previous slide. So one of the 3 is locally called 5 Trees. That's the mine site name because there's 5 large trees on the property. And this is the process by which we've signed them up to our co-development model. First, we started with a conversation with the license holder and approached him just on the basis of processing services. And he agreed to process a 1,000-ton ore stockpile, which we found out had about 5 grams per ton at our facility. And in return, we'd receive a 20% share of production. We then approached him and said that, you know, we'd actually like to help upgrade the 9 shaft operations that he currently has sort of subleased or allowed to operate on his land. Ultimately, the shaft operations which have contributed to his ore stockpile over time. And he gave us his blessing to move forward and do so. And 2 of these shaft owners have agreed to do this 80-20 split, wherein we invest in drilling the property, understanding the resource, informing where mine shafts should be built and to what scale, and then ultimately developing those with mechanized equipment, referencing industrial best standards or best practices on how to do so. And that's where we are today. So currently we are specifying exactly the format that we're going to be investing in these 2 shafts. Right now our plan involves about $100,000 worth of investment per shaft to produce between 30 to 50 tons of high-grade material, ranging from 5 to 15 grams per ton per day. So it's a 2-tiered process. First, we're approaching the license holders. We're helping them liquidate their stockpiles, and then getting their blessing on partnering with the actual shaft operations on their site and investing in upgrading their production in return for a share for the mutual benefit of everybody, because mechanization really stands to dramatically increase the amount of ore being produced at site. And a main sort of issue that comes up when you talk about offering processing services, about mechanizing mining activities, is displaced labor. So let's start with the processing side. So typically, mining operations will work with either sort of internal or third-party processing providers to turn their ore into crushed material, ultimately concentrate, and then into a mercury amalgam and then gold. And typically that first step of processing is highly manual, and it's done by women. So if we come in and we offer processing services, we're completely displacing that labor unit within the general value chain. So we're thinking about ways to sort of reutilize this sort of woman workforce. And a couple of ideas that we've had so far is that we're very attached to auditing mine standards. We think employing women as Mwamba employees to audit mine standards would be a great way to repurpose that labor. Some resources that we provide to shafts will be shared. For example, drill rigs. You might spend a few days mapping out one shaft and then need to go to the other, and there's going to be the need for somebody to be brokering that process and access, and we think women would be a great place to start. Second, if we go in and we mechanize shaft labor, what's the truism of automation? If you automate something, usually there's a little bit of manual labor cut out. There's a pretty easy solution for this, and that's that if you show up to a mine site and it has 9 shafts, that by no means means that there are only 9 productive opportunities to build shafts. So we intend to build net new shaft or underground operations on the licensed sort of properties of our partners, and we see this as an opportunity to reintegrate any labor that might be sort of displaced by the shafts that we upgrade. And then lastly, we want to take an active stance in improving general community welfare and access to critical resources. So this might require reinvestment. These might require actually sort of sustainable vocations that we help to stand up. And we're pursuing a few different ideas here, but really we're just getting going on the model. And I think how we handle displaced labor, how we create adjacent employment opportunities that directly benefit miners or indirectly benefit the community is something that we're continuing to put a lot of thought and energy into.
The next video is one of the client videos from the Mwamba team. It's just a 2-minute video, after which we will have an interactive Q&A discussion session.
We've got Ali here. He's our first toll customer, and he'll give us some details of the ore he's got. If you can see here, he's brought in a lot of trucks. We've already started the crushing and the processing. You can see more over there. Each one of those piles there is 1 truckload. Now, if you see here, I know we've got a few geologists in the team. They'll think that that's copper. But what we've done is put blue paint, sprayed a bit of blue paint over their outcrop for security. Okay, that's not copper, that's blue paint in these places there, and that's done as a security measure for the stockpile. Ali, where has the ore come from?
So basically we mine in an area around 60 kilometers away from here, 55. It's called Nyamakwenge, and we brought these almost 30 trucks, more or less, of our ore to start working here.
Okay. And what sort of depth are you mine? Is it at underground or?
We're doing underground. We're almost at 85 meters now.
Wow.
And
okay.
we're hoping to reach
most
likely 200 meters by the end of the next year.
Right. And the width of the vein, because it's a lot of
varies.
quartz.
Veins here vary. It goes from 1 meter, 3 meters. Sometimes it goes back to 50 centimeters.
Yeah, pinch and swell.
Yes,
yeah, okay.
Pinch and swell.
Okay, all right. Well, we've got to keep our #1 customer happy, and we're working round the clock to. We've had to actually adjust the crushing plant over there to suit this ore. Remember, quartz is a very hard rock, and we've made adjustments, and so it should all run pretty smoothly. You can actually see some of his ore already up at the hopper to add to what's in the hopper. All right, Ali, thanks very much.
We're so proud to work with you guys, to be your first customers, and thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you to our speakers for providing us with an insight into the work that you have been doing. I would like to formally invite all our guest speakers to come back on camera to allow for us to answer any questions that might be available from the audience. In addition, I would like to introduce everyone to a member of the Impact Facilities Investment Committee. Our CEO and founder, Ashton Stewart Carter, is also on the call today to answer any relevant question and provide his perspective on the session. Yeah. Abdulata and Edward, maybe come online. But before we do, there was one question to the Impact Facility that I would like to highlight. for my colleague Natasha, who is right next to me, to answer. Is there a guarantee required for leasing in the leasing mechanism?
Thank you, Candice. No, we do not require guarantors when it comes to our leasing product. Most miners, we do not require guarantors when it comes to our leasing products. What we do in Kenya, most miners are required to be part of cooperatives. So we require you to present to us your membership certificate of said cooperative so that we can conduct our due diligence processes.
Yeah, the question was specifically on the need for a guarantee or like a collateral.
Okay, in the case of collateral, since when you implement criteria as collateral to artisanal miners, you will lose a lot of miners since they don't have the capacity or the ability to produce collateral such as land or houses, as is typically what happens in the mining field. So what we require is miners to pay 10% of the total equipment cost. So what this looks like, if your total equipment is $10,000 US, we would require you to pay $1,000 US, which is the 10%. And also to de-risk our investments, we always ensure that we always ensure that the equipment cannot be installed so that it can be reclaimed and repossessed. Yeah, it's mobile, thank you. So we can reclaim it and repossess it in the case of default. I hope that is clear.
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha. And maybe over to you, Edward. Somebody, it seems like the audience may not have been clear exactly on the type of processing that you do over at Mwamba. So maybe explain a little bit more about how the carbon in leaching process is a mercury-free processing mechanism. Carbon in pulp, sorry.
Yeah, so commonly referred to as CIP, carbon in pulp processing, is a large-scale processing technology typically used by the large-scale mining sector. So that's it doesn't use mercury, it uses a cyanide input, which yes, is caustic, does pose its own hazard, but if properly managed, really environmental impacts can be sort of totally avoided. Usually it's not really brought up in the context of, ASGM, mercury-free processing technologies, because it's a very large-scale technology, and these ASGM workflows are, like I referenced in my presentation, very fragmented. So, our innovation isn't on some sort of new mercury-free technology. We're using the legacy industrial technology used by, all the majors. It's really our innovation is on trying to aggregate these fragmented ore flows into large enough volumes that we can process them in our facility. So again, CIP processing is inherently mercury-free. And it's just the way that we're positioning it as a processing resource for ASGM sites that are mercury dependent makes it sort of a mercury eradicating service or presence in the community.
Thank you, Edward. I think that was a really nice answer. And maybe over to you, Mr. Abdulata. There was a question in the chat box asking, at what level of artisanal mining are miners mostly excluded in Burkina Faso? So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about where women are engaged in artisanal mining in Burkina Faso specifically.
Hello. Hello, thank you very much. So,
Gracias por
in
tu
Burkina Faso,
pregunta.
the ASGM sector, if I have to map all the value chain, we have the extraction operations, we have the treatment operations, we have all the process from end to end. And when you mention the women, we have some operations that women cannot do. production wise, women do not have the strength for some operations, and it's very rare to have women in this type of activities. Sometimes women don't have access to the means to do these operations. Sometimes women are forbidden to do this type of operation due to cultural issues. And I have an example in the central west part of the country where women cannot have access to a specific area. So we have that type of restriction for women, and women, they are mainly taking part in washing the mineral, and that's one activity that they can do. Or sometimes they work with the leftover material left by men to retreat this material. So just to tell you that women, they don't have a full access, and due to the conditions of our context, sometimes women don't have the same access, not as at the same level as men. So that's something I wanted to add in terms of the women implication in our site. Thank you. And over to you.
Thank you so much.
Next question, maybe?
Yeah, just to augment what Mr. Abdulata has said, it is very typical in the artisanal and small scale gold mining sector for, as we all know, for men to be in charge of underground extraction processes because of the physical strength that it mostly requires. And then women are mostly responsible for the above ground processes. So typically, this is limited to sluicing and mercury use in most cases, hence why even in Edward's presentation, he said that with the introduction of more mechanized equipment, there is the real issue of the replacement of some of the labor force, in this case, women, from the processing requirements of the work that is done. And so that's basically how ASM currently works. And in some cases, as Abdulata also said, cultural norms limit women from going underground. Even here in Kenya, we have cases where women are not allowed to go underground simply because the community believes it to be a curse and that they would not be able to access the gold better or easier with women underground. And so that's mostly the dynamic of how the sector works. And I saw that there was a question here on what happens after to the impact facility team, that is, and maybe I would hand this over to you, Mr. Ashton Carter. So what happens after, the miner has finalized paying? What happens to the equipment in general?
So it's a lease to purchase model. So the miner pays down an initial deposit and puts up collateral, and once they've repaid the leasing fees, then they retain full ownership of the equipment, and hopefully that stays on the mine and continues to contribute to the efficiency of the operations.
Of $1 was once the mine has finalized the last repayment to the impact facility, they're able to gain full ownership of the equipment. And maybe one other question to you, Mr. Ashton, who I had previously introduced as the CEO, but he's actually the co-founder of our organization. So what can you describe a bit more how our environmental, social, and governance framework, the impact escalator, has evolved over time, and why we use this as the rationale of leasing out equipment to the sector?
Yeah, so the ESG framework is important for a couple of reasons. Primarily, of course, because we want to do our part to protect the workers and the communities around the mines and ensure that they are safe and the environment around them is safe. But also there's the access to market as well. So if our clients at the mines wish to sell overseas, there might be an arrangement where they could get a better price for their gold or a premium for the gold. So if they wish to do that, overseas markets are now quite stringently imply due diligence standards. So to that end, as was described by Calvin earlier, the ESG escalator framework does a couple of things. First of all, it's what is called a progressive standard. So we meet the miners where they are and acknowledge that you can't transform a mine with few resources overnight. So we at the first step of the escalator, think of a ladder. It meets the very basic requirements that you would want to see. So no child labor, responsible use of mercury. But then over time it increases its levels of efficiency and good performance, which are in line with those international standards. So those international standards coming out of the OECD, planetGOLD itself, and other requirements of purchasers who use gold. So in terms of how it's evolved over time, it's evolved again, you heard this earlier, because we've learned a lot of lessons about what is possible, what is practicable, and what is effective on the ground. So we've adjusted the standards from what we have learned. But also as these international standards also change, and we want to ensure that the miners have the most choice about where they sell their gold, that we've adjusted them to be in line with those standards too.
Thank you, Ashton. And maybe a question to one of our colleagues who is also on the line today. What kind of challenges have you experienced in trying to onboard women entrepreneurs into the leasing mechanism? I'm going to pose this question to my colleague, Mr. David Stamets. Yeah, because typically a lot of people involved in the, equipment, typically it's only men, it's largely men that are mechanized in the sector. And so how are we navigating as the impact facility, the inclusion of women in the mechanism?
Great, thanks, Candace, and sorry for not being on camera very early where I am. We have made conscious efforts trying to reach women, both throughout the recruitment processes, where we are advertising the leasing program and the availability of products, and during mine assessments, where we engage with women, also for the capacity building on financial literacy and else. And we're able, out of all the investments we've made, we had one successful deployment of an investment to a woman entrepreneur that managed the mindset, on the mindset herself. That was one of the referenced terminated contracts that Natasha and Calvin had elaborated on. But that's a small share of the total number of contracts, if we're thinking that we've done 12 investments to date. And it is, however, I think, in line with and reflecting the current dynamics that we observe across Kenya and Tanzania in terms of ownership. There are very few women in ownership and management positions, and the leasing model is designed to work with people that operate at that level. And so we continue to make efforts around engaging with women and engaging with women groups. We're now exploring how we can facilitate the setup of a collective to jointly own mercury-free processing, and then pivot away from individuals soluting and crushing to a joint processing site that could be women-run and women-owned. But the reality is, as to the point that Natasha also referenced, is that there is limited access to land, limited collateral, difficulties bringing up the first loss guarantee, and so there are some challenges that I think will require continued thinking on how we can refine this process. But it's definitely something that we are mindful of, and Natasha and colleagues are looking out for in the field directly. And maybe, Natasha, you want to add a little bit more to that in terms of capacity support or engagements we had with people like Esther. But we are making conscious efforts, but since we need to find people that are able to pay back fully, to date, we haven't been successful with making great progress on that end.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. I have one question to Mr. Abdulata. Given that village loans and savings mechanisms are very much a community-wide initiative, and you need to get the buy-in of the community to operate such a mechanism, and a successful one at best. How was your experience in building the trust of the community? How did you engage with the leadership of the community to get their buy-in to roll out this mechanism in Burkina Faso?
Thank you. And well, the approach needs, of course, the implication of the community. And this is a mechanism that involves money, and we are working with a community. We need to work with the authorities, with the administrative authorities, with the local authorities as well, with the resourceful people, the youth leaders, the women-led organizations. We need to work with them to present our approach, to present the mechanism, so that all these stakeholders can take ownership of this project and to understand the advantages of this mechanism in the community. And once this communication process is done, these stakeholders, if they properly understood the mechanism, they have to relay this information to the community so that everybody takes part in the project. And that's what we did in our project in Burkina Faso. We really took the time to introduce the program to all the stakeholders, because we need to take into account the previous practices before. And if the process hasn't really been acknowledged by the decision makers of the community, the government, and all those administrators, people may have a negative experience bias. So in our methodology, this is very important to really show our project take as long as possible so that people can really understand the new mechanism that we're trying to put forward.
I can see we have a hand up from Mr. Hamado there. Go ahead, Mr. Hamado. Mute.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to all the team for this very insightful session, sharing experiences from all the parts, right? So first of all, I would like to thank for all the initiatives that are moving towards an improvement of our industry, because this is a very important step that we have to take, the formalization. And without a joint effort, we cannot really have access to this formalization. So in terms of results, I know that we have to be ambitious. So I would like to congratulate all the innovations and efforts that have been done in this direction. Now, to answer to Candice's question, to follow up on the answer, the community implications is essential for the success of our initiatives. So, for instance, when we introduced one project to the community, the objective was the women empowerment. And we were targeting women, but also we worked with their male counterparts and we double down on the financial implication and how women could benefit to this financial implication and how this is good for the community, and how a gender mixed environment is better as a whole. And in this way, the community can really be more successful. And thank you very much once again, and over to you.
Thank you, Hamado. Hamado was also involved in the VSLA mechanism implementation in Burkina Faso together with Mr. Abdulata. So thank you for providing additional context to the question. Yeah, I can see that we do not have any more pending questions in the chat box. And please take note again that we will share the case study from the Impact Facility team on our leasing work with you. We'll also share the case study on the village savings and loans mechanism from the Burkina Faso team with you. And then we will also share with you any relevant resources and access to the website of the Mwamba team for you to learn more about their work. And so as we come to the end of the session, we can see that from the more rural interventions in Burkina Faso through the VSLM mechanism that has reached over 1,000 people, 80% being women who are even more underserved in the community. The lease to purchase mechanism in East Africa that has served as a bridge to formal financing to artisanal and small-scale gold miners in Kenya and now in Tanzania. To the toll milling mechanism of Mwamba operations in Tanzania that completely removes the need for mercury use through the use of the carbon in pulp gold leaching facilities. It's clear that there's a variety of ways to navigate the lack of financing in the sector, the lack of commercial financing in the sector. And so as donor and impact financing, that's serving the impact facility and toll milling services from Mwamba continue to serve the sector. We believe that in the future, such financing schemes are able to build the case for larger buckets of financing from innovators such as resource funds, banks, microfinance, private equity funds will slowly be involved in the sector. What we are doing at the moment is building a track record and saying that, hey, the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector or the artisanal small-scale mining sector in general is an investable sector, and here's an opportunity, and here's what we're doing to build a track record. And so as we come to the end of the session, I would like to give, to open this part of the session to my colleague, Susan Kin from the NRDC, to provide a couple of last thoughts, and then we will close the session after that.
Thank you,
Susan?
thanks, Candice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Susan Keen. I'm the global coordinator for the planetGOLD program. And I just want to take a moment to thank the Impact Facility for very, very ably leading us through 3 sessions online of discussion around the needs of miners, some of the planetGOLD approaches to trying to address access to finance, and as well as these innovative approaches by different actors outside of the planetGOLD program. Of course, there are many, many initiatives around the world that are addressing this very fundamental problem, which is we want to see an improved sector. We want to see the professionalization of the ASM sector generally and ASGM in particular. planetGOLD is very focused on doing that for the purpose of removing mercury from their processes, but there are lots of other development ambitions around the world for improving this sector and making it the engine of wealth creation and development that we know it can be. So again, thanks to the Impact Facility for facilitating and hosting all of these sessions, as well as the in-person session they held during our meeting in our global forum in Philippines earlier this year. We hope that we can keep the conversation going. This is the end of this particular series of discussions, but as you can see, there's a lot going on in the world and a lot of information. Candace has mentioned that she will, our team will be able to share with you a lot of the documentation that we've already created as a team of all of these different initiatives, so that you can have that as reference as you're moving forward with your own interventions. And we will continue to look to ways to continue to have this dialogue and conversation, whether it's planetGOLD providing that platform or other initiatives around the world that can help provide that platform. We're committed to making sure that we continue to share ideas, because the only way we're going to make progress is by building on each other's ideas and successes and learning from each other's challenges. So again, thanks and congratulations to the Impact Facility, all the speakers, everyone who contributed so much to making this such a robust dialogue. So thanks again. Back to you, Candace.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for making the time to be here today. We will again be sharing all the resources with you at the end of the call, and also in the near future share the minutes and the recording to everyone. Thank you to the guest speakers for making the time to be here. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Abdulata. Thank you, Hamado. Thank you to the Impact Facility team. And to everyone that asked questions, please feel free to reach out to the Impact Facility team, and we will keep you in contact with all the speakers should you need to do that. Thank you for taking the time. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening from wherever you're joining in from. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.